Hi everyone, this is Sarah Rising, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Godot community. This is our Fine Arts PLC neighborhood for elementary art teachers, the Visual Arts PLC. Today's episode is going to be a continuation of the first webinar where we presented the information on the Ted Harrison Inspired Landscapes. It's the tissue paper landscape program. And today's presentation will be a follow-up to that I show you the actual process of the work of me doing that. You can use this with your students. You can also use it with maybe students who have been absent, and then you can also use it as an instructional video for yourself. So I'm going to jump into this, and we're going to look at the tissue paper landscape art demonstration. Again, this is one of my student pieces, and you can see how that looks in its finished format. As I said before, we focused on the element of art, which was space. We looked at some of Ted Harrison's landscape art and talked about foreground, middle ground, and background. And today we're going to jump into this process video.
Hi everyone, here we go with the process video for the tissue paper landscape inspired by Ted Harrison. Supplies that you're going to need that I mentioned earlier, you're going to want a sheet of scratch paper or drawing paper. You're also going to want a sheet of 9x12 heavier weight paper, more of a sulfite drawing paper. And then what I use, I prefer the glue stick simply because it is less messy. But if you don't have glue stick, I've also done this project where I've watered down the glue and used a brush, applied the glue to the paper instead of a glue stick, and you'll see that in a minute. And then you'll want to have a selection of tissue papers. And for this group, I pre-cut the tissue and I put it in big boxes, and then I separate it out into little containers like this and put it on their tables. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. The first thing that I do with the kids is we review the Ted Harrison drawings and talk about spaces in his art. We review horizon line. And then what I like to do, I do this on a sketch, but I'm just putting these sheets on here individually. We talk about the horizon line. So I have them do a sketch where the horizon line is in the middle of the paper. And then I have them do another sketch where the horizon line is at the very, very top of the paper. And then we do a third sketch where the horizon line is low on the paper. And the reason I like them to do 3 sketches is to work through ideas. And they can decide if they want to go more with, I call these echo lines like Ted Harrison did, or keep it simple with just singular lines. We're focusing on the Yukon landscape based on those pictures. So we've got mountains, we've got water, you can include a path or a roadway. But I do like to have them go through the sketch. Once they've done that sketch in pencil, then they can choose which area they want to go with. So make sure that you review foreground, middle ground, and background, and then complete the sketches, and then they'll go into the drawing of the final paper. I've gone ahead and drawn out the picture in Sharpie just because I think it shows up better on the filming. And then what they do is they end up with this. And then I like to have the kids start with a color. And I also like to have them working on what I call, I'm sure you guys all do too, on a messy mat when we're doing the glue. So remind them that these pictures, when you're putting the glue on, you're working in an area at a time. So I have them select an area. Maybe we'll start with the water here and then just put some glue in the middle there. And then I just have them kind of pull out some tissue paper, just a little bit, and put it on their art. And then I teach them this little trick. I get some glue on the end of my finger, and then in order to work kind of quickly, when your finger has a little glue on the end, you can easily pick up individual pieces. And I also like to encourage them to get a variety of color by overlapping these pieces as they go. So they would just continue to work through all of that. And then once that's done, the glue probably dries a little bit and you'll have to get some more glue and then just continue to work on those areas. Now there's a couple ways you can go with this. Since I already have the glue out, I'm going to go ahead and work in just this little area here. Couple of points you might want to check as you're working is making sure that they understand that when I overlap multiple areas of this blue, point out how with just one or two colors, they can achieve lots of variety with overlapping. And that's kind of related to paint, but I think it gives kids a little more success. And I also think this is a really good hand-eye coordination process. Overlapping, getting those on there, and just seeing how many colors they can come up with in these skies. All right, so as you can see, I've got the sky done, and I just want to point out some bumps in the road that you may have happen along the way. Tell the kids it is okay to have these pieces coming off the edge of the paper like this, because you can always trim that when you're done. Now, another thing that I do, I have pre-cut the paper into their sharp edged squares. Something else you can do is you can cut these into strips and give the kids the long strips, and then they can tear them. That might be a good idea for your older kids, or you can have them just take the pieces like this and glue them on. Now, something else, a couple of things that I notice over the years that happens, I suggest that you glue the project paper first and then use your finger to stick on the pieces of tissue paper. There are always going to be those kids who are not fond of having glue on their fingers, so I keep out a pack of wipes so that for those kids we can deal with that issue when they are always wanting to run to the sink and wash their hands, so that kind of solves that problem. And then I always find the kids, you've got the kids that are like trying to put glue actually on the tissue paper, and then by the end of class, your glue stick looks like this with tissue all over it. So remind them, and maybe even show them as a demonstration the ins and outs of what not to do, which is primarily putting the glue or putting the tissue paper on the glue first, because then it comes into a big mess. I will say, however, a really cool thing came out of that. We had kids discover that it was pretty neat to ball up the pieces of tissue paper. So what they did is I had some, taking the tissue paper and then rolling it up in a little ball and sticking it on there. And I think that's a pretty interesting look. So, let them explore the materials and just see what it can do. It doesn't have to just lay flat. And it's also good fine motor skill practice as well. I do have to admit, I love this project for a couple of reasons. The kids often came up with other solutions because it is a pretty tedious process. One of the things that one of our kids had an idea was to crumble all the pieces first and then go ahead and do the gluing. So they just kind of took them and then just kind of sprinkled them on and mashed them down, which, sorry about that, which works really well for a way to get some texture. And it gives these pictures almost a 3D kind of sculptural quality. And it is collage, so, have fun with it. Then you can see Now sticking those on there like that gives you a whole new look. And that was one way that my kids came up with a solution to a problem. Another cool effect that I showed them, I don't know if you guys are my age, but I remember doing these in school. You take the end of a square of tissue paper, put it on the end of a pencil, and then wrap that tissue around the end of the pencil like so. And you can create a whole new look. So depending on the area, we felt like this was a great technique to use in grassy areas because it kind of gave a little feeling of texture again. And then just squeezing those in there and you get that raised look on the picture. So another thing that we did, I also like to encourage the kids to work in one color because you spent all this time cutting these pieces. And yes, the containers look all perfect and pristine on the first day of the lesson, but as we all know, what about on day 5 when you have your 5th class rotate through? So I like to remind the kids when you're done with a color, first of all, work the color on your paper, and then when you're done, put those colors back in the containers that they go. And it's okay if you have a little bit of mix up, but it makes things a lot easier in the end. And then one final point, I will work on this and come back to you and show you that it's finished, is just make sure that you are not using the bleeding tissue paper. If you don't know what bleeding tissue paper is, it's a tissue paper that once you get it wet and set it down, it will transfer the color from the tissue paper to your paper. If you use bleeding tissue paper with glue and fingers, you will have a class full of kids with totally orange or whatever color fingers from doing that. So just make sure this is the non-bleeding tissue paper.
All right. I hope you found that little tidbit helpful. I threw in some of the ideas that the kids had on the lesson. So let the kids kind of explore and have fun with it, I think is the most important thing with this tissue paper. Mine, when I look at it, all the squares are perfectly lined up, but remind the kids that this is collage and that is not what we want the final outcome to look like. And really have fun with it. Again, hope you enjoyed it. Before you guys go, I do have a quick question for you for our discussion post for this one. What are some of your favorite lessons that incorporate the element of art, which is space? So how are you doing landscape? What are some other things that you're doing to emphasize space in your artwork? Make sure that you post that response in the discussion and share that with the group, and then respond to others as they share out some of their ideas as well. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye.